Hello, everybody, and welcome to the post-Copenhagen edition of the Tottenham Way podcast. I'm Marcus Buckland, in the company of George Sessions from the Press Association, and we've both got smiles playing across our faces, glints in our eye, because Spurs produced something pretty special to win by 4 goals to 0. It means in the Champions League. They played 4-1-2 and drawn 2. It was a massive upgrade on Saturday's display against Chelsea. I appreciate very different opposition, but let's be positive. And George, first things first, would you go as far as to say that was the best 90 minutes of the Thomas Frank era thus far?
Certainly the best attacking display in 90 minutes. I think people will probably throw out the Man City performance, and I guess potentially the PSG performance for 75 minutes. But I just think I think everyone needed that. I think Thomas Frank needed that. The team needed that. The fans needed that. The club, we all needed a night at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium where it was electric. The football was brilliant. There was goals, and it was exciting. And I think that's the real thing that's been missing at home, hasn't it? There's been home wins, but we haven't had a lot of excitement. And then after the Chelsea game, and obviously the kind of tepid display that was, Thomas Frank really needed a big win. And I think it's also, everyone talks about how he adapts and how he learns, and I think he would have learned a lot last night actually. Not that he didn't know anyway that he needed to play good football, but I think when Tottenham go out there with that intent, the fans go with them. And then even that kind of, once you're 2-0 up, that's when you can play on the transition. Those last 2 goals are counter-attacking goals. And, Thomas Frank can't really play counter-attacking football at home to begin with. But once Spurs go a goal or two up, you can pick teams off like that. And, that's kind of when Conte's football was at its best, it was like that. When Spurs were ahead, the opposition come out, and then they'd be picked off with Son and Kane on the break. And we're going to come on to Micky van der Ven's Puskas awards. Just give it to him now already.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Frank would have learned last night that actually, when the team go out there with that intent, and you don't sit on the 1-0, you don't sit on the 2-0, you go for more. That's what can happen. And I don't think he would have experienced Tottenham Hotspur Stadium like that. We've had, like I say, we've had wins, but we haven't had the stadium as rocking as it was. So yeah, brilliant night, and we've got smiles on our faces today, and rightly so. It's a really, really important win, and a great performance.
And I think before we go any further, we've got to talk about that Van der Ven goal. I mean, it had me reminiscing of Gareth Bale at his very best, marauding towards the opposition goal. Sonny, when he was firing, I mean, the goal against Burnley. I mean, it starts on the edge of his own box. He goes past about, 5, 6 players. They're looking at him in awe, as we all were. And I love one of his quotes afterwards. He said, I started dribbling. I thought I'd see if they could catch up, and they didn't. Well, he takes some catching. I mean, that was sensational. And what a perfect response after the controversy at the final whistle on Saturday against Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess just throwing it back to you quickly, Marcus. What goal was better, Sonny's or Micky van der Ven's? I've seen a brilliant sort of social media clip of them both sort of parallel against each other, and I think I would say Micky's. I think, but I'm intrigued to see what you think.
I think I'd be tempted to go with Mickey's just because he's a central defender, and although I know he's brilliant and he's capable of going flying forward, that's not generally what you expect from a defender. You knew that Sonny could do it. And if I'm being really picky, I would suggest that maybe the Copenhagen goalkeeper, who had an absolute shocker last night. I mean, I don't know what he was doing for the first couple of goals. I'm wondering if a top quality keeper might save that at his near post, but I'm glad he didn't. It was brilliant, and I mean, the guy. I tweeted it last night, and I do mean it. He's superhuman, George, and as long as he stays fit, I mean, for me, he is without question the best defender in the Premier League right now.
Yeah, I think I saw a lot of people saying last night, just put that contract on the table and let him write the number. I think it is really imperative that Tottenham, he's got a long term deal anyway, it's till 2029. But I think just with the kind of worry of Real Madrid in the background, those kind of big Spanish clubs that will want a brilliant centre back, Mickey sort of should be on improved terms. I think the other thing about that goal, and and that kind of leads us on to Saturdays. Is actually, on Saturday, Micky essentially tried to do a similar thing in terms of dribbling out of defence, and he's got caught by Moses Caicedo, and obviously Chelsea scored the winner through that. And myself included, and plenty of others, we're probably sitting there saying, just clear the ball, Micky. Just smash the ball at the pitch and clear the ball. And to be honest, in the situation last night, it's 2-0. Spurs have just had Brennan Johnson sent off for a very harsh red card, I thought. He probably could have just smashed it. But actually, the Micky van der Ven that we love to see is the guy that does take people on and does take risks. It's risk versus reward, isn't it? And Thomas Frank easily could have said to him, when you're in that situation again, just clear it. I don't want you mucking around with it, just clear it. But he clearly hasn't. He's allowed that kind of freedom. And what we get is obviously, the goal of the season already, isn't it? It's just an outrageous goal. And it kind of reminded me of the runs he did against Everton and Man United last season. I was actually watching goals that Brennan Johnson scored yesterday from the 24-25 season, and that run at Man United come up, and I was kind of thinking, it'd be great if Micky could start doing that again, and he did. But yeah, I think it is kind of a reminder to all of us that Micky has that in his locker, and every so often, I guess you are going to get the mistakes like you did against Chelsea. But if you get goals like that and runs like that, more productively than those mistakes, which are few and far between, then it's worth it. And it's an amazing goal. And the roof come off the stadium. And after Saturday, obviously, very important. And I guess, Marcus, you obviously wasn't on the reaction pod, but what did you make of sort of Micky and Jed? And I'll bring in some of Micky's quotes afterwards, because we did speak to him last night in the mixer.
Yeah, and I really want to hear those. And actually, I like the Thomas Frank quote last night where he said, if he plays like that every week, then he can thank me after every game. I was, like I think everybody, initially really shocked. I didn't get a chance. I was lucky. I didn't get a chance to see any of the game. I was kind of looking forward to watching the highlights, and then I heard how bad Spurs were. And then I'm seeing these clips on social media of Spencer van der Ven walking straight past the manager, and it didn't look good. I was then really interested actually to hear the likes of Alan Shearer and other pros going, don't read too much into this. They are professionals themselves. They're just gutted. And frankly, what does it mean if when you've lost, you go and clap the fans? And as a fan myself, I'm not that bothered. I'm not necessarily expecting the players to come and clap me when I don't feel like clapping them anyway. So it's a little bit of an empty gesture. Obviously, it doesn't look good when you are sort of blatantly disrespecting a manager who takes that sort of thing very seriously. But I like the way it's been handled. From what I've heard, both players went in without being asked to the manager's office the next day and said sorry. So frankly, I want to put it to bed now. And, I'm pleased also that, the players should have been really hurt after that performance. If I was a player in the team playing like that, I would just want to get off the pitch. So I think we can park the bus on this now, can't we?
Yeah, I think so. And like I say, it was Tom Horner actually that asked Micky van der Ven last night. He sort of said to him, in your words, what sort of happened on Saturday, and I guess a little bit of context. In the mix zone, you can sort of wait 5 minutes, or you can sort of wait half an hour for a player. And Micky was one of the first people out, but he actually had to go up to hospitality to do the sort of man of the match speech. So he came out in his kit at that point, and we also said, "Oh, Micky, have you got 5 minutes?" And he said, "I've just got to go upstairs, but I'll be back." And then sort of 15 minutes later, he comes back and he's still in his kit, and he did say he would speak to us, and I think give the club credit, because they easily could have said, "No, Micky, don't speak." Thomas has said what he said on Monday. Let's leave it at that. But they were happy for him to come out, and I've already sort of lost my head a few times this week with quotes being misquoted by aggregators and regarding Vicaria. So I'll read Micky's quotes in full. It's not too long, but it's a little dig at the media there, but it's fine. I think he gets his point across. So Tom Horner asked him, in your own words, what happened, and he said, "It's the past, so I don't want to make it bigger than it is. Jed and I walked off. We were just frustrated after the game, and everything got really exploded, to be honest, by the media. It was nothing big, to be honest. Everyone thinks it was the gaffer. There was nothing to do with the gaffer. We were just frustrated after the game because of a bad performance from myself as well. we want to play well, and I didn't play well, in my opinion. So I was just frustrated, and I just wanted to go quick inside. And I think, as you said, it kind of it put sort of closes the chapter on it. Case closed, isn't it? And it wasn't a great situation on Saturday, but I think frustration in that situation when Micky was involved in the goal is understandable, and same for Jed, he was involved in the goal. And I guess just whilst we're on this subject, just to kind of round it off, fair play to Thomas Frank. I think he's handled this really, really well. Me and Tom were talking on Saturday and saying, what happens next? Does he discipline him? Does he drop him? Is it kind of is it going to become a big storm? It sort of felt like Thomas Frank had a small fire on the floor there, and it could have quickly turned into a real crisis situation if he disciplined them and dropped them, and then Spurs lose against Copenhagen, and then it's a crisis. But we went there Monday for the press conference, and the first answer he said, two players came in and unprompted apologised. They were frustrated. It wasn't anything aimed towards me, and it's case closed as far as I'm concerned. And I think actually, a really tricky situation he's handled very well this week. And now, as we both said, we can move forward and look forward to more Micky van der Ven goals, and hopefully Jed
Yes,
Spencer's got something similar on Saturday against Man United.
that would be very nice indeed. And actually, just to go a little further on the other point you made, and this is really important, some of those quotes about Vicario that were badly misconstrued by certain people. And I know obviously now everyone's got access to social media, and you've got to be very careful in terms of what you read and what you believe. But that was potentially damaging because Vicario has been obviously in fantastic form of late, and what he was saying was definitely not what sort of came out. And I understand why Van der Ven they're saying to you guys, "Oh, the media's made more of it than they should." Well, look, they're going to in a circumstance like that. But it's very tough when a player like Vicario is trying to be honest with you guys. And then, I mean, listen, we're getting it in all sorts of walks of life with allegedly Donald Trump and the BBC at the moment. But people have got to be a bit more responsible when actually relaying direct quotes from players, haven't they?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's kind of why I took a bit of umbrage with it. I guess anyone that's not aware, there was kind of a paraphrased quote from Vicario from Monday's press conference where he gave four really good answers about the fans and kind of saying, they're entitled to be frustrated. It's like if you go to the theatre and you watch a bad show, you're going to give your opinion. And he said in Italy, it's probably even worse. But it was essentially a quote from Vicario where he said, you know, if we had more help from the fans, it would be better. And that was kind of chucked out there as the sort of sole quote, basically. And then fans that are frustrated 24, 48 hours after Chelsea is thinking, what Vicario is saying, that we're to blame for the 0.05 XG on Saturday. And it wasn't the case. He said that in a really long answer when he also said, and I get the frustration of the fans at the end. We were all frustrated. It was a London derby and we weren't good enough, so we understand the fans, making their feelings clear, and that was the kind of key bit left out, and that's why I saw it sort of Monday night, and I was kind of getting more frustrated the more kind of social media accounts that I saw putting out there, and then all the replies from kind of sort of semi high profile fans, I guess you'd say. And then it just kind of creates that potential kind of toxic environment. If Vicario sort of makes a mistake on Tuesday night early on, all of a sudden he's kind of public enemy number one, and everyone will be saying, "Oh, well, that's we're not going to help you, not going to help you if you're making mistakes like that." So I just thought it was important to put out the full context, and I think if you're going to go after any Spurs player, don't go after Vicario
No,
after the last few weeks he's
no,
had. But I just think
absolutely.
as a kind of a wider point, it's really important. If you can't watch the press conferences, try and read the full quotes, because we've got really good people at the club. Thomas Frank's a really good communicator. Vicario is one, Micky van der Ven's another. But there's some really good kind of people at the club that do come out into the media and speak more often. And as someone that does other clubs from time to time, Tottenham do generally always put players out, and it is much appreciated from the media point of view. But I think for fans want to hear what players have got to say, and if you listen to what they're saying in full and hear the way they're saying it, I think it does sometimes read better rather than paraphrase quotes put out on social media.
Yeah, no, I would agree that the Tottenham PR is much better at the moment. They've had another difficult story to deal with overnight, and we'll come on to Destiny Udogie had a great game last night, and this astonishing tale of him being threatened with a gun by his agent. But let's save that for a little while. I want to talk to you in a moment about Xavi. Oh, what a night for him. Kalamwani as well, the penalty incident. But you've mentioned your man Brennan Johnson a couple of times. I know you have a soft spot for him, and I understand why. You came up with some good stats on social media before the game yesterday. I hope I've got them right. But now 101 appearances for Spurs, 27 goals, 18 assists, which is excellent. Obviously, a very difficult night for him because having scored, I think I'm right in saying he's become the first British player to be sent off in a Champions League game, having scored a goal. First of all, the goal itself, I thought it was a really good finish and a reminder of what he can do. He showed terrific composure from quite an acute angle, didn't he?
He did, and it is just what Brennan Johnson does. You give him a kind of, you give him a chance, not a sniff. I don't feel like he can score sort of an XG goal that's kind of 0.10, but you give him a proper chance, and generally he's going to take it. And I just kind of feel where Spurs have been in this situation kind of since the international break, really, where it's just not clicking in attack, and they don't look like scoring other than from set pieces until obviously Tuesday night. I just feel like you just need to get Brennan in the team because he does have that goal threat, and even if if he's not scoring, then it's clearly an issue. But there was one scenario last night where he bombed past the fullback, and he chipped in, and Pape Sarr headed it over, and I kind of think if he can just add that a bit more to his game, the times when he doesn't score, because he's not going to score every game, if he's doing that 2 or 3 times a game and linking up with Porro and linking up with Xavi, then it kind of makes his position in the team kind of, a bit more understandable why he is in the team. If he's not scoring, clearly it's a big issue, but I feel like he needs to be in the team at the minute. And Kudus has obviously had a really, really good start to his life at Spurs. But it has felt like he's kind of been a bit jaded the last few weeks. And the other thing, if I'm being hypercritical, is he hasn't got many goals or assists. He's got the one goal, hasn't he? He's got a few offside goals, frustratingly, but he hasn't got the goals and assists. And I guess if you just sort of take a step back, on paper, Thomas Frank's come in, he's played the new signing from the off, and he's dropped last season top goal scorer. If you didn't know that was Brennan Johnson and Mohamed Kudus, and we were talking about another team, you'd probably say, "Oh, why have they dropped their top goal scorer from the right wing position? Surely he is nailed on for that." And okay, Brennan Johnson hasn't done enough consistently to be nailed on for that. But I think there probably did need to be a little bit more rotation in that position. I think rather than Kudus just playing there every single week for the last sort of 2-3 months. But yeah, it was brilliant for Brennan to get that goal, and rather frustratingly, he obviously got the red card. And I've personally felt it's kind of a professional tackle we see all the time, isn't it, Marcus? Somebody's burst past you, you put your leg out and you pull them down, and you get a yellow card because it's a professional foul. And I think where it's kind of frustrating is we're in the era of VAR where you put a still image and it looks obviously terrible
Mm.
that he's kind of caught him high on the Achilles. But if you watch the footage, and even if you watch the footage slow down, his sort of foot is on the ground and it only bounces up and then it kind of goes a bit higher than it really should. But I think really that's a yellow card all day long. And I don't know this for sure, but I have been told it will only be a 1 game ban for Brennan
Yeah.
Johnson, which is important, because I was thinking, oh God, he's now missing 3 games, and Spurs are already without some players in the Champions League. He's got Tell and a few injuries, so he can't have another attacker missing out. But it will just be PSG away he misses, I believe. So that is something of a positive. But yeah, it was great to see him in the team and get a goal. And I think, like I sort of said at the top, he is that goal threat, and he can be the one. You think of his goals this season. He also scored, early on at Man City to kind of open the game up, and then Spurs could sit back and kind of hit on the counter attack. So I think he's definitely got a role, and I'd like to see him start against Man United. To be honest, I really would. I think Thomas Frank needs to kind of stick with something for this week, not chop and change, not change for the opposition. Stick with something. Copenhagen, not the best opposition in the world, but we saw patterns of play last night. We saw Xavi linking up with people. So let's build on that, I think, going into Man United.
Yes, I must hold my hand up and say I was very critical, maybe overcritical of Johnson after the Newcastle game. I just knew, unfortunately, I'm not trying to sound clever, but we had that little conversation at the time. What game would you rather win, Newcastle in the cup or Chelsea. And I mean, we all knew we were going to lose to Chelsea anyway, which is why I said Newcastle. And, he is frustrating, Johnson, because you know what he can do and how important he can be for the team. So that was encouraging. And I'd also agree, yeah, a little bit unlucky the way the player's leg comes down almost onto his boot, which then you get the freeze frame. And once the ref goes over, none of them seem to have the guts actually just to stick to their original decision, and it's frustrating. But you're right, as far as I understand, it's only a one-game ban. And from a playing point of view, if you're going to miss one game, PSG away, it is probably a good one to actually miss. Now, Xavi, some lovely touches, as you say, some link-up play as well. How important might that 90 minutes prove to be in terms of him starting to bed in at the club?
Yeah, it was a really, really big night for him. And I know he was frustrated to come off, but I sort of hope when he watches clips back of the game, which I'm sure he will, he'll see the ovation he got as he walked off, and he'll think, actually, frustrated as I am that I only got 60 minutes, I hopefully am fresh for Man United and I can build on that. And sort of without kind of, you know, blowing my own trumpet, I've really wanted him to play in the Champions League because I've just felt like that's going to be his platform, especially early on, to kind of build confidence more than anything, and obviously to show the quality that we know he has. But it was only Copenhagen, but we just needed, and he needed to make an impact and to get an assist, really, just purely for his stats and the numbers point of view. But it was a lovely ball through to Brennan Johnson. And there was other moments. He had an early shot which was deflected wide, and I was pleased that he did that because we've seen him before. The Aston Villa game springs to mind, not take the shot on when it opens up for him. And I do kind of go back to another point that he's building a really, really nice relationship with Wilson Odegaard and Destiny Udogie. And I only realised, I think it was either this week or last week, actually him and Odegaard were in the PSG academy together. And you can actually see that they've got that relationship, they've got that kind of rhythm. And there was a beautiful moment where they sort of played a brilliant 1-2. The ball bounced off of them. It was so quick, and really Xavi should have had another assist because he set up Colin Wani, who put it wide from 12 yards. And there was another cross actually for Colin Wani from Xavi that he should have scored. So really, he could have walked off with 3 assists last night. And I think if he'd stayed on the pitch, he probably would have scored, and we'd all be saying this was the Xavi Simons match. But hopefully we're saying that on Saturday against Man United, because now he's got that confidence, and you could see it he had a spring in his step straight after that assist. A big hug with Johnson after the goal, and you could just see a tiny bit of weight lifted off his shoulders. And I think we saw enough last night to know, okay, this guy has got something. Some people might not be happy with his reaction to come off. It's not the best look, but it kind of is just a trend now. How many times do we see footballers come off and they're unhappy about it? Mo Salah does it plenty of times, and no one really moans about him too much. But no, it's a really, really big performance for Xavi, and much needed. And hopefully that is the springboard that he needed to kick on, and we sort of start to see the best of him, because clearly it's not been the case. But I do think that him with Wilson Odegaard, they just click. And that's what he needs. I think Xavi does need the connections. Tom was saying it to Tom Allnutt the other day. He needs connections with players, and I think Thomas Frank's got to stick with that for Man United. I'd like to see Odegaard again on the left and Xavi in the 10 and Johnson on the right, to be honest.
Absolutely right. We'll talk more about that Manchester United game shortly. I love the look of Lee, pure joy on the face of Odegaard when he got, I think I'm right in saying, his first goal of the season. Depending on what platform you're listening to us on or watching us on, we'll take a little break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about Richarlison's penalty and Kolo Muani, who, as George just mentioned, had a couple of golden opportunities to get his first goal in Tottenham colours. George, before we talk about Kolo Muani, I'm jumping about a bit, but when Scarlett won the penalty late on, I'm thinking, right, let him take it. And the moment Richie grabbed the ball, I turned around to everyone and I said, I'm sorry, there is no way he is converting this in his current form and state of mind. And lo and behold, he thumps the underside of the bar and it comes out. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, we've had issues in the past. I don't say this was an issue in terms of who they didn't know who was going to take the penalty, but for me, come on, Scarlett. He's young. We're still hoping he might do the business. He's set up the chance. Why didn't he take it?
I know, yeah, I know. Just to kind of, I guess, give a little bit of a defence of Richarlison. He's a forward, isn't he? You know, he wants to go. We had a similar issue against AZ Alkmaar last season in the Europa League group stage. I don't know if you remember. I think Maddison won the penalty potentially, and he had the ball, and Richarlison come over, and he sort of wanted the ball, but I think Maddison was the designated taker. And Maddison said afterwards he sort of stood there for a couple of seconds and thought, actually, Richie's just come back from injury. He's desperate for a goal. I'll give it to him. And I thought Richarlison was going to miss that one actually, but he did score
Yeah.
that, and it did sort of remind me. I had a kind of half a second where I saw Pedro Porro get the ball, and I was thinking, "Go on, Pedro, give it to Dane. Tell Dane to come over," because players like to sort of take the ball off so the guy taking the penalty doesn't actually get distracted. But yeah, it's a bit of a sour note, wasn't it? I do understand why Richardson would have wanted it, and for his own confidence and for his own belief to kind of put that away, and he's got a goal, maybe he's then up and running. But it did feel like when you're 4-0 up, it is such a good opportunity to give a youngster a go. But on Dane Scarlett, fair play to him. I certainly don't kind of think he's going to be the next Harry Kane. Everyone sort of hopes when a young player comes through the academy, has a few difficult loans, and suddenly they're on a bench in the European format that potentially they could still with Harry Kane if they get an opportunity. I don't think he's going to have a really long career at Tottenham. I'll be totally honest, but he did look bright last night, and that was a really lovely piece of play for the penalty. And heaven forbid Spurs get any more injuries in the forward areas. Maybe it's just shown Thomas Frank that Dane Scarlett's worth a few more minutes. If
Mm.
Spurs do suddenly lose Kolo Muani and Richarlison, which touch wood they don't, but yeah, he did. He had a good cameo.
Well, on the subject of Kolo Muani, and you've mentioned those two chances that really he should have put away. And we know he can score goals, and he's just finding his fitness again. So, how do you assess what he's doing so far, and how confident are you that he might start to find the back of the net sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, it might just be me, but I thought he was really good last night. And I didn't. I know he missed those two really bad chances, but I didn't kind of walk away from that game thinking, "Oh God, this guy's never going to score," or that affected him. I really didn't feel like it affected him. The touch he produced for Wilson Odegaard's goal is just majestic, isn't it? And I think if a guy has missed chances and he's got that plan on his mind, he doesn't do that, does he? He doesn't bring it down like that. He probably tries to volley it in and hits it wide, and he certainly doesn't bring it down and then pass to a teammate. So no, I think we're seeing good signs from Carlo Mane. I really do. Whilst Dominic Solanke is still not available, and Richarlison's obviously not in the best form. Spurs needed Kolo Muani to step up, and I think he showed some really bright moments last night. He burst past the player at one point and drew the foul, and the Copenhagen defender got a yellow card. And I love that kind of spring and that kind of acceleration that he's got. And we're not seeing loads of that at the minute because obviously Saturday was a difficult game. Spurs didn't get the ball to him too much. But I sort of like that he's had a couple of chances against Copenhagen, and yeah, admittedly he should have scored definitely one of them, probably two. But I think it's coming for him. I really do. And like I said, he didn't seem bothered by those missed chances, and I don't mind a forward if they're going to miss a couple of chances if you know that they're going to score the next one. And I think maybe if Spurs had given him one more last night, I think he probably would have scored it. So yeah, I think he's a real positive actually. Spurs needed a focal point, needed someone to sort of give Xavi a little bit of connection and a little bit of support in the attacking areas, and I think he did do that well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you want your striker to be getting chances first of all, and then obviously to be converting them, and he is getting them. And you're absolutely right. The way he kept his composure, because I did think when well, again, the keeper came out, didn't he? And the ball flies up in the air, and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to be a bit desperate. He's going to either try some sort of a diving header or a volley. But no, he really did maintain that composure. Led it off very nicely for Odegaard. The other scorer last night, of course, was Polinia. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from, was it Jamie Carragher in particular, after the Chelsea game at the weekend, saying no wonder Bayern Munich didn't want him. No wonder no other Premier League team was interested in him. I mean, he obviously not been watching the guy this season. I don't quite know what he was basing such negativity upon, unless it was simply, okay, if you're looking at this pivot that we've spoken about all season, and how sometimes, the fact you've got Plenia and Bentancur together, it doesn't necessarily work for Spurs at home in particular. But to criticise him individually when he's played as he has done over the first few weeks was, I thought, a little bit of a dereliction of duty when it came to football punditry.
Yeah, he was very, very strong. He was very strong in Tottenham actually, and look, he went after Ange a few times last season, and I didn't always think it was totally fair. And I didn't expect him to sort of go as heavy as he did on Thomas Frank. Somebody was saying to me that he's always been quite pally with Thomas Frank in the past, but I'm not sure he'll be invited in for a wine next time
No.
Sky are there. But yeah, to call Tottenham play like a League Two team, they were really poor on Saturday, but that is very strong. And yeah, João Palhinha, we actually wanted to speak to João Palhinha last night in the mix zone, and in his defence, he did stop, but he was with a one of the Spurs security guards who said, people are waiting for you. And João Palhinha is brilliant. He's a mix zone legend. We would call him in the media because he'll stop, win, lose or draw. He'll always stop to talk, and he's a very good talker actually. And I think he will be a manager one day because he just seems to have his head screwed on. But yeah, he did cop a lot of criticism from Carragher for sort of not having the quality to play those passes. And I think Jamie Carragher's punditry and his analysis is often very, very good. But I think he sort of missed the wider point and kind of the discourse that all the Tottenham fans are having. Actually, it's not Palhinha that's the problem. It's been more Bentancur actually. Them two together in certain games, obviously against the bottom half, doesn't seem to work. But Tottenham fans are kind of saying take Bentancur out and leave Palhinha in. But having said that, I thought Bentancur was fantastic last night. That was like seeing the old Bentancur. He was leading the press. He was passing forward. It was him, I think, that passed to Xavi, and then Xavi turned it on to Johnson for that first goal. And Bentancur also got criticised quite heavily by Jamie Carragher. There's a few still shots of Bentancur not necessarily showing for the ball and being brave enough. And yeah, he really, really was on it last night. And I guess if we're going to come on to the Man United game, if Thomas Frank's going to go back to the Palhinha Bentancur sort of double pivot against Man United, which I can understand because it's a top six team, even though Man United obviously not been the top six for a while. Bentancur needs to play like he did last night. He needs to take the onus. He needs to get on the ball. He needs to pass it forward to Xavi. He needs to make runs. He needs to support from deep. He can't be a double pivot essentially. He needs to play as the number 8. And he did that last night fantastically. So yeah, it was a good response from Bentancur. And obviously Palhinha come on. We're all thinking Thomas Frank's going to shore it up 2-0, keep it tight, and then Palhinha's bombing forward. Christian Romero's bombing forward. It was pandemonium, but it was great to see.
Yeah. As much as I would criticise Carragher for what he said about Polina, actually, I'm hoping that it might be a little bit of a wake-up call for Bentancur because he is a terrific player, and sometimes maybe you need a neutral to just remind you of what perhaps you're not doing. I was also a bit surprised that Thomas Frank said that he hadn't seen any of the analysis. And I know as a manager, you can't go off and watch everything that everyone's saying about you and listen to everything and read everything. But also, I'd have thought in this era where there's so much video evidence, etc., it might be quite instructive, particularly after a performance like the one we saw against Chelsea, to have a little listen to what some of the quotes experts are saying, and then either dismiss it or maybe just take it on board a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of again, I feel like he played that pretty well last night because he could have really gone back and said Carragher's wrong, and then he kind of he takes away the whole Van der Ven 4-0 win. It becomes a big, Frank versus Carragher story, but him just sort of brushing it off. I thought was quite clever, actually, quite
Mm,
quite tactile, and he doesn't need to give Sky
true.
any more sort of exposure than they already get. They're everywhere, aren't they? Get plenty. But no, I think he handled that quite well. I'm sure he would have been made aware of it, but it was Monday night, and he had an important game to focus on 24 hours later. But yeah, I thought that was another one actually.
No, fair
He
enough.
handled well.
Yeah. I'm not going to make this negative in any way, but because a 4-0 win's a 4-0 win. when we look at Copenhagen as opponents, they've now gone 9 Champions League games without a win. You mentioned you saw some patterns of play from them, and obviously they're half decent, or they wouldn't be playing at this level. But is there a danger that we as fans might now get a bit carried away and then be in for a chastening experience as early as Saturday when Manchester United come to town, or is there enough genuine evidence from the way Spurs played last night to make you feel that they can learn, they can turn a bit of a corner now?
Yeah, look, let's not pretend that Copenhagen are Arsenal or Chelsea. They're clearly not anywhere near that level. But I think it was just important for Tottenham to firstly attack like that, score goals like that, and for certain key individuals to get the goals that they needed. You know, Brennan Johnson being one, Xavi with the assist, Wilson Odogie getting a goal was important as well. So I think that's the kind of main. It didn't really matter who Tottenham played because they could have struggled and they could have won 1-0, and we'd all be saying we can't see any sort of progress at home, certainly from an attacking point of view. But they just needed a big night like that where it all kind of clicked. And they were brave and bold. 2-0 down, like I say, they really could have shut up shop and just sat on a 2-0. But it felt like the night where you needed more than a 2-0 win. You wanted to see some flair, and we did in the end. So sure, Copenhagen, they can come again certainly, but I think Tottenham just needed, and Thomas Frank and the players and the fans, because the fans needed that kind of big night at the stadium, which we've not
Mm.
had for a long time. And I did think the atmosphere was good last night. Again, it sort of shows, when the team go out, they have good intent, they get an early goal, and they don't sit on it because Tottenham tried to get another goal, and they probably should. There was, as we say, Colo Muani missed a few chances, but the team went out, they carried on playing, and the fans responded. I thought there was plenty of times. The Copenhagen fans were excellent as well, by the way. But there was plenty of times when the South Stand got rocking, just at random points in the first half and again in the second half, and like I say, that little burst of Van der Ven scoring and Joe Palin, the stadium really really was alive, and it was a poor attendance, wasn't it? Last night it was only 49,565,
Yeah.
and maybe Marcus, you'll talk more about why we think that is. It's not great, is it, for a Champions League night? And
No,
there is lots of
no.
factors, but it was Tottenham needed to give those 49,000 an entertaining night and 3 points, and they did. So that was the main thing.
Yeah, and I want to ask you in a moment about the little shift in pattern in terms of how they were trying to G the crowd up, because I found that very interesting. I can't get to European games because of work commitments, but yeah, last night 49,565 for the Villarreal game, 54,755. But of course, we had 61,000 in for Chelsea at the weekend. I think the actual capacity is 62,750, which begs the question, why are attendances so much lower for Champions League games? And a lot of people online going, we are having to pay far too much money for Champions League matches, particularly those against not exactly stellar opposition, and Villarreal and certainly Copenhagen can hardly be put in that category. So it looks to me as though the club have got to be a little more sensible in terms of how much they're charging for Champions League games in particular. And another subject that I have touched upon before as a season ticket holder, this business now that if you can't go to a game, the exchange things become really complicated unless you're giving it to a member. It doesn't work, and so I mean, luckily for certain games, like last week, I couldn't go to the Chelsea game. I was relatively easily able to sell my ticket on, but it's not as straightforward a procedure as it was, as it should be. I really hope, and I think you were telling me beforehand, George, that there are talks afoot to try and make it a little more straightforward in that department, because we want prices to be okay, and we know how expensive it is to be a Spurs season ticket holder anyway. So let's be careful, and particularly to ensure a brilliant atmosphere for all Champions League games, just be a little bit kinder with the prices. I don't think that's being unfair at all, is it?
No, I don't think it is, and I think the pricing is a big issue. And as you say, the kind of the ticket exchange. If you're not a member, then you can't be part of that ticket exchange, and so people are having to sign up and pay. I think it's £55 to be an adult member. I know that the Tottenham Hotspur Trust are sort of liaising with the club and working hard and pushing the club as they always do to make changes. And to be honest, I think that I'm 99% sure that yesterday was announced that actually the Borussia Dortmund game has gone from category A in pricing to category B. I'm 99% sure that was announced on Tuesday. So that's really good. You know, the club have listened in that scenario because it felt like category A for Borussia Dortmund, as big a name as they are. They're not Real Madrid, they're not Barcelona, they're not, PSG. So that is a really good sign. I know the trust were pushing for that to be changed. And I believe, as I say, the club have changed that. So that's really good. We obviously know there's been big changes at the club. Binay is now running a lot of it, and we've all of us have said the two times in yourself, Marcus. Everything we hear from Binay is he's so receptive, he's so willing to listen to fans, and he's big on engagement. He wants to understand the issues, and I think changing that. It's a small change, but going from category A to a category B game, knocking some price off it is a really good start, and hopefully, I think as we go through the season, we'll see more sort of changes like that. And you mentioned, Marcus, the pre-match build-up. Before the Chelsea game, me and Tom were talking about how they kind of turned the music off for the last 5 minutes before kick-off and allowed the fans to build a bit of an atmosphere. And they did the same again on Tuesday night. And they also kind of, I noticed it. I'm a big fan of "Can't Smile Without You." Not everyone is pre-match because not everyone thinks it kind of gets you going, but it transitioned quite nicely into a club song yesterday. I can't think what song it was, and then that transitioned quite nicely into when the Spurs go marching in on, over the speaker. So I think that sort of did get the crowd going, and I think we can only give credit to the club for trying to make changes, trying to do something about the atmosphere. Because look, we've got a fantastic home stadium. It really, really can be a fortress. We know that. We saw how good it was against Bodo. It was absolutely a cauldron of noise. And shock horror, Tottenham score after 34 seconds through Johnson, and they were pretty much in the final at that point. And we saw it with Arsenal a couple of years back in the North London derby. I think it was under Conte, wasn't it? 2022. When that place is rocking, it is so intimidating. And if the club are listening to fans and key kind of fan groups that are trying to make changes, and they put them in place, I think slowly but surely we'll see Tottenham Hotspur Stadium become a fortress again. And like I say, I can only give credit to the Tottenham Hotspur Trust for continually trying to push this, and the club for now listening, because I don't think they've always
Yes.
listened in the past.
Oh no. I mean, it's been a difficult couple of weeks in terms of certain performances, but I do finally sense that you're right. Fans are starting to be listened to, and it's still early, and we don't want to get carried away. But there has clearly been a sea change at the top of the club. Thank goodness for that, and that can only unite everybody and make us feel hopeful and optimistic about the future. I touched upon another awkward story for the Tottenham PR team that emerged last night. I mean, I'd read the day before that a Premier League footballer had been threatened with a gun by his agent, and you think, yeah, who's that? And it turns out to be Destiny Udogie. And obviously, you were there last night, so you heard how this story developed. And understandably, the club were looking to protect the player as much as possible as this story. 'Cause it happened a few weeks ago, didn't it? But suddenly it's become public, and it's obviously not a nice situation for Destiny himself to find himself in.
Yeah, really, really horrible situation. It's still a live legal case, so you sort of have to kind of say, Destiny was allegedly, kind of threatened with a gun in London. It was back in September, at the start of September. Yeah, he wasn't named at the start of this week, and unfortunately, he was named by Italian media, yesterday, sort of late afternoon, early evening, and Tottenham did put out a statement last night saying we've been providing support for Destiny and his family since the incident, and we'll continue to do so. But they can't say any further because it's a legal case. And yeah, it's just a little bit of kind of info around the edges. When Destiny was named in Italy, he was at the ground. He was at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium preparing for the game. So I'm led to believe he wouldn't have been aware that he had been named. And so the club kind of waited, I think, until after the match to speak to him and to let them know that actually he has been named in Italy. So now he can be named in Great Britain, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just really, very, very unsavoury. not great for him to be named. I don't. I think in these situations we don't need to know who that is personally. But once he has been named in Italy, then obviously it's kind of fair game, unfortunately. But I think the club sort of did the right thing to kind of protect him, let him stay focused on the game. He was fantastic last night, and God, we just need him to stay fit because he just brings that balance with this team, and I love that relationship that he's building with Odegaard and Xavi. But yeah, really pleased that he's back fit, and hopefully this, obviously very, very messy situation can be dealt with behind the scenes, and Destiny can be allowed to concentrate on its football. But it's no
Yeah.
wonder that you know I'm not saying he's had some injury problems because of this, but it is sort of almost a proven fact. When you've got stress and when you've got things going off the field, it affects the body, and you can get injuries. We have seen that before, so hopefully this can be kind of taken care, and he doesn't have to worry about it anymore, and he can be allowed to concentrate on his football because he's not started too many games for Tottenham this season, but whenever he does, he looks
Mm,
fantastic.
he does, yeah, absolutely. Talking of injuries, Manchester United at the weekend, 12:30 kickoff. I was amazed actually when I looked at the league table, bearing in mind they were held to a 2-2 draw by Nottingham Forest at the weekend. They're only 2 points, United, now off second place. I mean, the whole of that middle upper part of the table is so concertinaed at the moment, which is potentially worrying from a Spurs point of view. You boys very correctly after the Chelsea game said one of the reasons perhaps Spurs fans haven't got too down in the dumps of late, despite the poor home form, is the fact they've been riding high in the league. But a couple of bad results against United and Arsenal, and suddenly we could be 13th or 14th. Equally, a couple of wins, and we're right back up there. So this is a really big game, obviously, before the international break. Up until recently, we knew that Spurs always lost just before the international break, but we put that right last time around. Now, can you tell me the latest in particular on Kudus, who, by the way, I agree with you, he's been excellent. We'd like to see more goals, more assists. He'd also looked a little jaded, understandably. Um, Picked up a knock at the weekend, as did Jed Spence, but of course Spence was part of the squad last night. Are we confident that Kudus can be available against United?
I'm not so sure. He walked through the mix zone last night, and he said hopefully he'll be fine for Saturday. But I just I think actually it wouldn't be a bad thing if he's on the bench. If he's fit enough, put him on the bench because the team that went out against Copenhagen, and yes, it is Copenhagen, but as I've said, there was kind of connections and partnerships, and the balance of the team looked good. So I don't think you need to change too much before Man United. And I think also what's helpful is it's Tuesday to Saturday. Last season the big grind was Thursday to Sunday, which is 3 days, and the Tuesday to Saturday gives you just a little bit more breathing space and a little bit more time for that sort of starting 11 to recuperate and be ready to go again. I think probably the only change that I personally would make is maybe I would bring in Palhinha for Pape Sarr. I don't think Pape Sarr was bad last night. I just think against Man United and with their kind of, they've got Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro in midfield, but Mateus Cunha is a wonderful footballer and he sort of drops deep and picks it up. And I think you'd almost want Palhinha on Cunha, or if not him on Fernandes to kind of shut that down. But as I sort of said earlier, if that's going to be the midfield, if it's going to be Palhinha, Bentancur and Xavi, Bentancur's got to play like he did last night. He's got to play as an 8, not as a 6. He's got to bomb forward. He's got to support the attacking players. But yeah, this will be a hard game. Man United were a crisis club again about a month or so ago. But Ruben Amorim's kind of got it going. I think he picked the same team for the Nottingham Forest draw as it was against Brighton the week earlier. I don't think he'd done that at all in his reign. I'm fairly certain. So he's kind of settled on. He's always settled on his formation, but he's kind of settled on a kind of the personnel. And they look in a good place, and they were always going to be better this season because they don't have Europe and they've got that free week. Makes a huge difference, and they made some good signings in the summer, Cunha being one. And I'm not the biggest Brian Mbeumo fan. I kind of don't think he's a brilliant goal scorer, but he's a very, very good player and very dangerous. And Thomas Frank will know about him, but this will be tough. But I hope that Thomas Frank kind of takes lessons from last night and focuses on what Tottenham can do in this game. It's at home. It's against Man United, who are a good team, but Tottenham have had the better of them for a long, long time. I think it's 2022, the last time we lost to Man United. And look, they've had different managers, they've had different players, and I think they feel in a much better place than they did in May against Bilbao. But this Tottenham team has enough attacking players and enough sort of defensive solidity to go out there and beat Man United if everyone performs to their best. So I'd
Mm.
like Tottenham to and Thomas Frank to focus on what Tottenham can do, go for the game. It's always a great atmosphere against Man United, and hopefully we get the big Premier League win now that we need at home. Because if Spurs do beat Man United, then Thomas Frank's fine. We can go to Arsenal, we can lose at Arsenal because it always happens, and we can lose at PSG, and none of us are going to be saying, "Oh, is he under pressure? How big is this Fulham game at home on November 29th?" That won't even be a story because he's got a big win against Man United, and we know that we are moving in the right direction, albeit it's going to take time. So yeah, it's a big game. It's an important that Spurs put in another good performance, and I think they will. I'm not so sure that they'll win. I feel like it could be a 2-2 draw or something like that. But I think as long as they put in a good performance and don't lose, and I think we'll take that after that Chelsea performance last week.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if the worst happens and they do lose, at least they've got to go down fighting, give their absolute all. But you're right, this isn't a game really that we can afford to lose. One last point, just a bit of a random one, but again going back to what we discussed after the Newcastle Cup tie, where of course Kinski came in for Vicario, who has been in magnificent form. So I'd want Vicario to play every single game, but I understand why you need to give your reserve goalkeeper an outing. And it actually just struck me that last night, if you want to bring someone like Akinski in, a home game against Copenhagen in the Champions League would be a better time than an away day at Newcastle in the League Cup. I mean, I guess it seems almost, it's the Champions League, so we've got to play the main goalkeeper. But I go back to how important that Newcastle Cup tie was. So I'm kind of hoping down the line, maybe we think more along those lines, because also at home to Copenhagen, in all probability, your goalkeeper's not going to be quite as important.
Yeah, it's a really good point actually. In these Champions League games, you do see rotation, don't you? Because the kind of the level isn't nowhere near as playing Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. And I guess just thinking ahead, probably Anton Kinitsky plays against his old club, doesn't he? Slavia Prague in a couple of
Definitely.
weeks.
Yeah.
Actually, I would never have thought about that until you've just said it. But now it makes a lot of sense. It probably is a good game for him to come in. If he doesn't play that game and he plays the FA Cup at the start of January, he would have gone, what's that, kind of 2.5 months without playing a game, a competitive game. So, yeah,
But
potentially
also, and
that.
on that front, George, I'm sorry, but the FA Cup is now massive. And I do get that changes have to be made. You've got to keep players fresh. Again, I would almost rather bring Kinski in for a home Premier League game against, I don't know who it might be, but not one of the big teams. I don't understand why the cups are the time when you make these changes. I don't want to bang on, but it's a chance to get to Wembley. Play your best players in those
Yeah,
matches.
I do understand where you come from. I don't think that will happen, unfortunately. I can't see Kinski kind of, I'm trying to think what the game is before. I think it's Brentford away, maybe Brentford at home before the FA Cup in January. Can't see Kinski starting sort of that Brentford away game, unfortunately. But yeah, I think these Champions League games at home against this level of opposition, I mean, what did Vicario do last night? He sort of, had a couple of shots, but really they were sort of rolled back to him, weren't they? Rather than any sort of anything kind of too strenuous, and he probably needed a night where he wasn't too busy
Mm.
after some recent performances. So yeah, I think probably Kinski against Slavia Prague. That could certainly, I think we're gonna make that happen now. I'll have to
Bang the
ask Thomas
drum.
Frank. I'll write it in
Yeah,
my phone that the press conference
please.
before. I sort of write notes on my calendar. This is what I should ask him.
Yeah.
So I'll do
Okay.
that.
Great stuff. Listen, George, thank you. I think that is just about it. I'm sure Vicario is going to have a great game. He'll need to have a great game because United, yeah, they look better. They want revenge after
Oh, Marcus, actually,
Bill.
did you want to
Oh,
ask some sorry, some listeners to send in questions because
oh, I do.
we're gonna
I've
do
got it
another
all.
big Q&A, aren't we?
I've got it all here. It's prepared. I want to first of all say that if you are watching on YouTube, hello. Do give us a like and subscribe. That helps a lot. If you're listening, then do try us out on YouTube as well. We're on X, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, and we would love you to email us. It's the Tottenham Way pod at gmail.com. That's the Tottenham Way pod at gmail.com. We've already got a whole host of emails. Some really good points have been made over the past couple of weeks. And whether you wish to be positive about what we're saying, criticize us if necessary, but anything that you want to discuss with regards to the team. One excellent email from Australia on the subject of whether anybody in the squad has improved so far under Thomas Frank. That's just one of the issues we'll discuss during the next international break. So do send those emails in. And I hope, George, you've been enjoying our TikTok channel, where since I last spoke to you, we've gone from 4 followers up to nearly 30. And it's going to start mushrooming, mate. We're heading towards the big time now. You do realize that, don't you?
I don't know if you actually look at who follows you, but one of them was actually me.
Uh,
I
damn.
mean, it counts. It still counts. I don't use TikTok a lot, but I am on there
No.
to watch funny videos every so often. And but our videos are not funny; they're very professional.
Well, listen, it's all a very professional approach now. So do follow us in every way possible. And thanks for your company once again, George. Thank you. I know you're looking forward to Manchester United on Saturday just as much as me, and of course there'll be a reaction pod straight after that game. George Sessions from the Press Association. I am Marcus Buckland. Come on, you Spurs.